Okay, so we've done the DHSS with a resource R in fixed supply. You could think of that as land, or you could think of that perhaps as the sunshine coming in, as I had in the picture. And then what we found was that on balanced growth, you have this penalty on the growth rate. One thing we didn't look at was the resource price. We'll look at that in this example, and you'll see how we could have got the resource price in the previous one as well. Okay, so what have we got in this example? In this example, we've got household, firm, labor, production, consumption, investment, and the resource. But now the resource is not in fixed supply. Now we have to send some widgets off down the mine to dig up the resource with and send it in. Okay. And note here, the only input in the mine is widgets. You could have also had inputs of labor and capital in the mine instead of the widgets. And you would basically get all of the same results. It's just slightly messier, so that's why I chose to do it this way, but it would work out the same. Okay, so you could have labor capital inputs here and labor capital inputs here. And we call this flow X, the flow of widgets into the mine. And note that there's a big difference between I and X, because these widgets are used up in the mine, okay, whereas I is adding to this stock of capital. There's no stock of widgets in the mine, it's not capital, these are inputs that are used up, okay. And we say, we've got the same production function. Y is ALL, the 1 minus alpha minus beta, k to the alpha r to the beta. So we can say straight away that when we differentiate this with respect to time, we're going to get the same result as we had before, which is y dot over y is 1 minus alpha minus beta times g, or AL dot over AL, and we carry on assuming that L is constant, plus alpha k dot over k plus beta r dot over r, which is the result we had in the previous video, right? Okie doke. And now we've got that k dot, the rate of change of capital, is, instead of S times Y, it's S times Y minus X, right? Yes, yeah. I'm just thinking about it. So Y comes out here, and then we say that X goes off to this sector, and then so that leaves Y minus X, and then Y minus X, we say that a fraction S of that is investment, and a fraction 1 minus S is consumption. It's just how we choose to define things. Okay, we could have defined S differently, but we defined it like that. Okay. And then we've also got depreciation, right? Minus delta X. That's the rate at which stuff's disappearing. So again, we can say that k dot over k is s y minus x over k minus delta x over k. So I guess we could also write this if we wanted. It's s y over k plus s minus delta. Now, man, what am I doing here? I'm trying to read this tiny writing. I'm thinking this is very weird. That's not x, is it? This is k. So then we get that. Yeah. Okay. So it's pretty, and now we're going to say, let's assume we're on a balanced growth path. So this is constant over time. Okay, not just, over time. So what does that imply about this? It's pretty clear that if this is growing by 1%, this 1%, this 1%, then this whole thing is going to be constant. But is that necessary for this to be constant, that they're all growing at the same rates? It is, but I'm not going to actually prove that. Okay. I'm going to ask you to take that on trust. That all of these, y, x, and k, all have to be growing at the same rate. So we then have y dot over y is k dot over k is x dot over x. Okay. But what's x? X is, we can link x to r, okay, because r is just phi times x. Yeah. X is the only input to the extraction sector, and the output of the resource is just a parameter phi times the amount of the input. You double all your inputs, there's only one. You double it, you'll get double the output. Okay. And the point is, the resource is abundant, so it's not like getting harder and harder to extract or something. It's just constant. The rate at which you get resource out is in constant relation to the rate at which you put in inputs. So then, dr dt is phi dx dt, isn't it? R dot is phi x dot, and phi x dot is actually phi r x. Sorry. Let me do this in 2 steps. R dot is phi x dot. But phi is r over x, isn't it? So it's r over x, x dot. So we get r dot over r is x dot over x. And of course, once you get the hang of this, you can just write this down. Look, if r is phi x, where phi is a constant, if r is growing at 1% a year, x has to be growing at 1% a year. So r dot over r must be equal to x dot over x, right? So then we can add that. On a balanced growth path. So then this is y dot over y, and this is y dot over y2. And when we take them over, we have y dot over y, 1 minus alpha minus beta equals g, 1 minus alpha, 1 minus beta. So we end up with y dot over y equals g. We're back with solo. Because the point is, yes, we need this for extra input, but that input quantity on balanced growth grows at the same rate as the technology grows at, or our productivity grows at, labor productivity grows, so it doesn't put a brake on growth. Of course, the level of consumption will be a bit lower because you need to send some of your output to the extraction sector. But the growth rate of consumption, production, everything else will be the same as in the basic solo model where you don't need the resource. Okay. And this is kind of like the real economy that we see, yeah? Where Y and R grow at the same rate. Remember the figures we saw before. We'll talk about that in the lectures. Okay. What about the price of R? What about WR? And come to that, WL. I'm just going to pause and think about how to go through this. Okay, so how do we work out prices on the market? We need to set up the profit maximization function if we're looking at input prices. So who's maximizing profits? We want to focus on this guy, yeah? The representative firm. So we take one firm and assume it's operating on a perfect market, and it's maximizing profits, which is its production, Y, times PY. But we've got perfect markets, and we normalize that price to 1. Okay. So it's Y minus its input costs. WLL WRR. Okay. And Y, of course, is equal to this. I'm saving ink here by not writing that out. And then we take the first order condition in L, for instance. So we go dy dL is 1 minus alpha minus beta times what we started with, which is Y, over L. Minus WL equals naught. Okay, so we get equals WL. Okay, so then from this we can see that WL dot over WL is equal to Y dot over Y, isn't it? The wage is also going to grow at the same rate as Y. What about the first order condition in R? That is going to be beta times Y over R equals WR. So again, oh no, so here it's different. So, yeah, let's take a look at this. Beta, so let's write it like this. WR equals beta times Y times R to the minus 1. And dWR by dt, or WR dot, is what? How much does WR change over time? It depends on how much Y changes over time multiplied by the effect of Y on WR. And how much R changes over time multiplied by the effect of R on WR. Okay. So how much does Y change over time? Well, that's Y. Y dot, isn't it? dy dt times dWR by dy. dWR by dy is just WR over Y, isn't it? And then plus how much R changes over time times dWR by the R. dWR by the R is minus WR over R. So it's minus. So then when we divide through by WR, we get WR dot over WR equals Y dot over Y minus R dot over R. So what happens to the resource price in this model? It's constant, because resource use was growing at the same rate as Y, wasn't it? But in the model where R is fixed, what happens to the resource price? The math is exactly the same. R dot over R is 0. The resource price will track growth. So this model predicts that the price of land should grow in line with GDP, but the price of coal, say, should be constant. And we'll find that this fits pretty well to the data. Okay, so that's the model with an abundant resource, costly to extract.